Good morning. Thanks for joining me for this huddle session today. I want to talk about the instructions to closing attorney quick. There have been lots of changes to this form, and I think it is causing some confusion. I have gone over this once already, but I kind of want to just touch base on it again real quick with regards to the different sections here, 1, 2, and 3, versus what's on the listing agreement and whether or not the seller has to sign it, right? So there's lots of confusion out there. Everybody thinks, oh, I have to get the seller to sign the instructions to closing attorney. That is not the case, okay? So if we go back here to the top of the instructions to closing attorney, we'll talk first here. Line 1 is compensation paid by seller to seller's broker, right? So that will be determined based on the listing agreement. So only the listing agent is privy to that information and will have it, right? So whatever the listing agreement says, if it says that the seller is paying the listing agreement paying the listing broker 6%, 6 would go up there. And then if the listing agreement says that the listing broker is to share their compensation with the buyer's broker, half of it, 3%, right? So they're getting 6% from the seller. They have sharing 3% with the buyer's broker. Section 2 would be filled out, right? That is the same way we've been doing this for years now, right? There are really no changes to that. When that happens, the seller is not required to sign this form. Okay, so if you look down here, y'all don't read your forms very well, but I'll read it for you. If the seller is paying the buyer's broker compensation referenced here, so if the seller is paying the buyer's brokerage compensation, the seller hereby signs this agreement to reflect the seller's consent to payment of compensation made by the seller. So the only time that the seller needs to fill it in is when the seller is paying the buyer's broker directly. As a buyer's broker, we have no idea whether or not what's in the listing agreement. Last time I went over this, I was talking about how the listing broker put 6 and 3, and we had 3 here. That's saying that the seller was paying the listing broker 6%. The listing broker is sharing 3% with the buyer's broker, and the seller is paying an additional 3%. Right? Yay, buyer's broker, we're going to get 6%. No, that's not going to happen. In instances where the compensation paid by the seller to buyer's broker directly, then the seller would have to sign this instructions to closing attorney authorizing that charge, if that makes sense. On the buy side, we will have no idea what's in here. It's going to become more and more evident that because of all these changes, the listing broker is going to have to provide this.
So, question.
All right. So, quick question. Yes, sir, Mr. Shimon.
We send this when we're trying to get the offer binded. So I guess that would only be valid if, again, we don't know what's in the listing.
You don't know if the seller is paying you directly or if the listing broker is paying you, is sharing their compensation with you. You won't know. So on the buy side, you don't have anything that you can fill out there. You don't know which way it's being presented. Even if you're writing your offer using special step 620, where it says that the buyer requests that the seller pay your commission, even when you use that language and the seller agrees to it, the listing agreement would control this instructions to closing attorney. Therefore, the listing agent needs to complete this and send it out.
So you helped me with a problem that I had before recently on my last sale, to where it was a stipulation that I put that specifically says that the buyer or that the seller will be paying full of the buyer's commission. Now, is that pertaining just to the seller or to actual agency, to the broker?
It can be written multiple ways in the contract, but there is a listing agreement. So the question is you had a special stip, the seller agrees to pay the buyer broker commission.
We just wanted the special language because my clients, when they were going over their buyer brokerage, had that little language in doesn't pay the buyer's commission, are you going to be willing?
You'll
to
be
pay the
responsible for the
Exactly.
difference.
So my buyers are like, hey,
We want to make sure the seller is going to pay it. How the seller pays it, whether the seller pays it directly or the seller pays it through the listing broker, you're not privy to that information and you still can't fill out this. But if you have the 3% language in the, does it matter how you get paid? Nope, it's in the contract saying the seller is going to pay it, whether they pay it to their broker and their broker shares it, or they pay it directly is what I'm talking about here. So if the seller's paying it directly, they have to use that. Another form that you're going to hear about next week during Connect is this pre-showing compensation agreement. I'm not going to dive really into it that deep during this session here, but this goes over compensation being offered to buyer's broker. And again, there is a seller signature spot down here where the seller would authorize whether or not they're paying.
is that only to show property?
This is a pre-showing compensation agreement. Yeah, we'll talk about this one next Wednesday. I'm not going to dive into this one. I just wanted to point it out that there is a signature spot for the seller on this one as well. It's going to be a business decision on whether or not you decide you want to try and get this and do all that. Me and Michael have fun with it next week. So like there's a spot for the brokers to sign it, obviously, but then down here for the seller's signature again, and it says if seller is paying buyer's broker compensation, seller hereby signs this agreement confirming that they agree that they're going to pay. And then this one actually tells you seller does not need to sign this agreement if all compensation is to be paid herein to the buyer's broker from the seller's broker.
So let me ask you a question. Could the seller's agent use that to be able to show property to a buyer's agent? For the buyer,
Could the seller's agent?
So basically if I'm the seller's agent,
Yep.
I have the listing, and I get phone calls all the time from agents, hey, mind if I send my people over there? And I typically let them know that their commission is
Protected. So somebody's sending their agent over to view your listing and you tell the agent that their commission is protected still. You're not doing the whole, if I show your buyer your commission is 1% thing? Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah,
How does it?
I typically tell people that their commission is protected, but if I really wanted to, could I use this as a listing? Agent?
As a listing agent to kind of allow, it's not really meant for that. This is an agreement between the brokers. So like you could, I guess if you were the seller's broker on this, right? And you had the buyer broker send that over to, and you could write a special stip in that, they're sending this person over and you want to additionally assure them that the commission is protected. But when it comes down to that stuff, that becomes arbitration issues. And while emails and text messages may not, or especially text messages may not hold up in court, they typically do hold up as sufficient evidence in arbitration. But, you're still running a risk if you don't have something signed officially, right? But all of our contracts say we'll go through arbitration and not through legal. Make sense? So I just wanted to point that out. The seller signature, people are getting all worked up about it. It's not needed, again, unless the seller is paying the buyer's broker directly without going through their listing broker. Good deal? Perfect. Thanks.